Yep. Eric, how you doing?
Yeah, good. How about you?
I'm good. Good evening to you and everybody on that side of the world. It's morning over
Good
here.
morning, man. Good morning, man.
Yeah.
So how was your week?
It was all right. Just kind of very quiet time of year. Which is nice. So lots of working out myself, and currently I have one player that I work with still, which is good. Keeps me busy, gives us something to do still every day.
So, last time we finished, we said that this time we're going to talk about like core and breathing. Okay?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah.
So first thing, I know we already done this before, but still, can you introduce yourself for the
Sure.
audience?
Yeah. My name is Misha Cavaye. I am a strength coach, massage therapist. I work for the South Bay Lakers, the G League team, as well as obviously I work independently with all kinds of people. Definitely a sort of movement-minded guy, sort of a movement biomechanics-minded guy, but a little bit of everything because I'm very holistic, believe in proper recovery. I believe in every system that the body has does work together. They all depend on each other. So how are we managing our systems cohesively? So that's kind of what I do.
Cool. So, kind of like want to jump into like core. I know you mentioned on your Instagram, like core is the relationship between rib cage and the pelvis, right?
Yep.
So how exactly does that work?
Okay, well, so we have apex skeleton and appendages. So we got the pelvis, rib cage, and skull, which is three major key parts. And then we have two arms and two legs, which are also major, but they kind of sort of function in sort of a different realm than these three middle sections. And not to neglect the head, but we're going to have to sort of cut the head off this conversation because we're talking about the rib cage and pelvis. However, again, a different conversation for a different day. This is incredibly influential to everything below, believe it or not. Vision, teeth, if that's all messed up, trust me, your whole system's going to be struggling. But let's talk about your question, which is core, the relationship of the rib cage and the pelvis. Well, the rib cage, so vital. Got the organs, protecting the organs, right? It's got all that. It's a big protector, but it's also a big sort of house, you could say, for the lungs. And so that's obviously very important in terms of how that functions in breathing, proper expansion, proper compression to get rid of air. These are things that we subconsciously doing, but not often doing well enough to facilitate proper breathing motions. And the muscles that surround the rib cage are your core muscles. We got rectus abdominis, transfer abdominis, there's a lot of them. You can't even sort of neglect any of them because we can even talk about muscles below the pelvis. But all these core muscles, these ab muscles, do attach to the pelvis. From the rib cage to the pelvis, they're completely linked. So if you think about something as basic as a sit-up or a full exhalation, whether you're thinking of ab crunching or proper breathing, at the end of the day, those abs are being drawn in and you're pulling your rib cage down towards your pelvis. So realistically, basic sense, that is what it is. It's the relationship. But then let's talk a little bit more, not like sit-ups and crunches. Let's talk about actual biomechanics and how we're supposed to move. So that's what the rib cage does. It's got protects the organs, collects all that. So we got to keep that somewhere. What does the pelvis do? Well, that is the driver of our vessel, right? You got the two legs that do the moving, but without the pelvis properly adjusting itself over each leg, walking is going to be a bit of trouble for us. And it is for some people. Some people struggle with walking because of this very issue. So the pelvis is that main driver. gravitating and balancing yourself with one leg and the other. Well, if we have this rib cage that sits on top of it that's completely lacking its job, again, we're going to see a lot of dysfunction. We're going to see a lot of tension elsewhere. And if you think of the spine, which connects the two together as well, this is why we get all this lower back tension, because, well, something's got to hold us together. You know, our vessels are not completely stupid. They're again, path of least resistance. I think I mentioned this word to you last week, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I didn't. The brain will always pick the path of least resistance. So something's going to hold you up. The spine's there. It's a pretty sturdy thing, and it's got muscles that are holding it together. So those are the dominants. And usually we get lower back pain because we're neglecting our core. We're not doing enough balanced exercises. And sometimes it's not just the core. It's the core's relationship to the pelvis, which has to gravitate from one leg to the other and back and forth like that tennis rally I was talking to you about. If that is not happening fluid and efficiently, path of least resistance, we get compensation, we get dominancy, and boy, with all those organs weighted on your right side, putting more weight on your right side, with your diaphragm better attached and lower on the right side, better supported on your right side, there is so much influence pushing you and pulling you to one side. We get this dominancy of asymmetry. And this is why it is incredibly important, by my summary sentence, to be able to, well, it's not just a relationship of ribcage to pelvis up and down, but this pelvis moving side to side, and then can the ribcage adjust with it? There's a bit of an opposition effect, but there's also a bit of togetherness if you really watch the micro things, because they can't completely go together. That doesn't make sense. So there's a bit of a swing toward, and that healthy relationship is really what it's all about.
Cool. So you mentioned like the body is asymmetry, and it's going to be more dominant on the right side, mostly for most people, right?
Yeah.
So why is that?
Everything starts with brain function. All right. Your brain function is number one, because without input, what are you going to do? You're just going to sit there, right? You're going to be a sponge. So we have brain, we have input, vision. 80% of, I get input into the brain is visual, right? So what we see is what we do. And so we live ultimately in a left brain dominant world, whether that's nature or the metropolis. Yeah, I mean, because nature is scary, if you think about it. Nature obviously has a lot of good balance in life, but nature is fierce, You either have to kill or be killed, and even interspecies you see fighting, you see alpha males killing off other ones. So there's a lot of cool things in nature, and you have to understand that's sort of part of life. But the beauty of nature is that they're out also in this beautiful, wondrous land and eating natural food and doing all the good things. We as human beings are also very much stuck in our left brain, just because although we have all this comfort around us, we are still surrounded by stress. We are still constantly thinking about the next thing, the next paycheck. For some of us, this is the next meal. But this dominancy to a sympathetic drive-driven lifestyle, which is, your brain, stress and relaxations is labeled as your parasympathetic system, which is the relaxation system, and the sympathetic system, which is your on stress system. We just live in a lifestyle that's dominated by that. Internet, cell phone, technology, access to information, all of that, just being around lots of people. So you have to understand that if we're not manipulating ourselves, our environment, to somehow get into the calm state, we don't leave this. So this is kind of key. Number one, we have to sort of understand this, because this is a big deal. And this is why nowadays we are giving meditation more of a platform. We're talking more about, de-stressing. I guess the go hard all the time lifestyle is kind of being sort of, people starting to see like, it doesn't actually work for everybody, because burnout's a real thing, and stress and all that's a real thing. COVID, all of that, pandemic, being stuck at home, like everybody really sort of embraced what stress is. So, we have to be able to manipulate that, but our point is our brain function and what we want, our drivenness guides us. So if we're a really driven person, that is ultimately driving us. Now, that was a big little topic on just the brain, but I hope you could philosophically understand what this impacts sort of who we are. It really does. If we're a quiet, timid person, there's repercussions with that as well. You know, people are scared. They're sort of, you know, a little bit more tense. There's those who hold their heads high. They're confident because they're loud, and they're usually, you know, the athletes. Yeah, those people sometimes have a little bit more of this aura about them because of how they think of themselves, you know. So brain function is incredibly important. Now, we talked about organs, and I talked about the diaphragm. That's huge, you know, because that's automatic weight. But the diaphragm is probably the bigger thing, because we breathe 22,000 plus times a day, every human being around. So add that in with your brain function, which is very stressed. You're not resting. You're always on the go. You got a million projects, blah, blah, blah. Chances are your breathing's going to be very rapid, high-paced, and whatnot. Similarly, on this point, I encourage you, next time you hear somebody fall asleep and snoring, listen to that timing. I guarantee you it's very fast, and that is not how we should be sleeping. If you're talking about a nice, slow breath rate, 5 second in, 5 second out, couple seconds pause before you breathe in. Nobody's doing that. Now, that is a parasympathetic driven breath rate, but how much time do we spend there? Very little. Chances are, because of brain function, we're going to be in this rapid breath rate. And then again, the on-the-go lifestyle, the environmental stress, the uncomforts of, oh, I'm in this traffic, or oh, I'm in the train sitting next to all these people, I'm in the office, I'm with people I don't want to be with. All these little things are affecting us, our mental state, breath rate. All that in turn brings upon more asymmetry, because you're affecting this diaphragm that is biased to pulling the ribs down to the right and is biased to being more open on the left. The breathing system's asymmetrical too, in how the diaphragm is shaped. That's why if you go look on any human being, unless they're sort of compensated, any human being has a left rib flare, indicating that the left ribs are a little more open than the right. And that's actually, it can completely sync with our organ placements. We have more organs than the right. We have a heart on the left. The left is more open. Well, that helps the heart. Heart can push blood through more easily. We also have more lymph nodes on the left. That makes sense, because the lymph nodes need to flush. They can flush more easy on the left. So you could almost say that our thorax is in a state of compression on the right and open on the left. And that's a very reciprocal relationship throughout our other parts of our body. You guys would be so surprised of how much all this stuff is linked together. You know, we're even the eyesight completely asymmetrical to what we're looking. Jaw, there's always one side that's a better clencher, another side that's a better chewer. Hips, there's always one side that's a better stabilizer, one side is a better pusher. And this is just how we were designed to be. It's magical. You could argue it was done this way so that we could alternate. You know, if we were balanced, one could say, well, how are we able to move? You know, in physics, to begin some sort of alternating movement, there needs to be some kind of asymmetry or roundness or something. You know, if you think about spheres moving in space. Well, for us, we had an asymmetrical body to allow us to alternate, because everything in our body is alternating. Rest, digest, awake, sleep, you know, excitement to calmness. Everything is a pendular activity, including the brain function. It's just, how are we spending our time?
So since we are born like imbalanced, and then why is it like so important for us to try to decrease the imbalance, or maybe find the way to be balanced?
Yeah, because if not, again, path of least resistance, through stress and strain and all that, you're gonna fall to a side or whatever if you're not consciously using the other side. This is why, as movement specialists, strength coach, therapists, you name it, whatever, we should always be encouraging our clients or athletes to use their weaker side or get better with their weaker side, even if they're not necessarily going to use it in a sport or in life. That's not necessarily what it's about. It's more actually about, it affects brain function. It stimulates more of the right brain, creativity side, it's fun sometimes because, it's, I'm trying something on my weak side. And the fact that you're having fun already enhances the effects of what we're trying to do. The point is, a lot of injuries, pain, and everything, I don't want to say comes down to imbalances, but when you're trying to heal the person, rehab, whatever, at the end of the day, what we're going to do is build balance to the structure. And I think that is all because of the fact that, well, that's what we're really looking for. If we have a path of least resistance, we're going to fall to one side, then we're going to need some activation, awareness, proprioception on the other side. That way we can actually even, I can do this here. Sometimes it's even an awareness thing, until you learn to properly feel your left heel and breathe. That left split squat might be incredibly painful and not comfortable because you just never learned to just do it properly. So this is important because, again, we now even will start rejecting our weak side if we're never addressing it. And that will be problems down the road. One last point to this. While I don't think you'll ever be able to be equal, me, somebody that constantly works on jumping, my right leg will never be my left leg, never. The fact that I train it, though, and it has skill, and it can actually jump up on a box, not a high one, but it can still jump. I have a pretty damn good right leg, and goes back to my quote last week where I said there's always one good leg or no good legs on an athlete. Rarely do we ever see two good legs that can function independently.
Cool. So here's one thing you mentioned last week, and I know you also mentioned on your Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Is like you mentioned, breathing helps you find balance. How does that work?
Yeah, so multiple ways. Well, first of all, let's talk about the biomechanics, relationship of pelvis to rib cage, right? So you take a step onto your left side, your imbalanced side. Let's just say you're not comfortable there, or loading onto your left, and a plant step, which a lot of people don't like doing, loading onto the left. So let's say you do that. The hip has to load. Let's say it does for this one time. You kind of let your hip fall in. So your hip loads. We get some we get some acetabular femoral internal rotation. So not the other way now. We're not talking internal rotation of femur going towards the pelvis. We're talking pelvis going in towards the femur because the femur is grounded, right? We took a step. It is grounded. So the femur gravitates over. Well, everything above has to kind of follow a little bit. So that's where the rib cage has to follow. The best way to get a rib cage to follow the pelvis is with a nice, good exhalation. That gets your obliques going, gets all of that compressed. All right. And if you also look at yourself in the mirror in a single leg stance, usually that's how you will be able to get nose, knee, toe aligned with an arm reach as well to just get yourself all the way over there. So that's just sort of biomechanics. Now, like I mentioned, accepting. So because we don't have the proper acceptance sometimes of this left side, it becomes a sympathetic state just to even be on it. So the fact that we learn to breathe properly almost manipulates that to allow us to get into more of a parasympathetic state and accept the depth per se. This is something you can actually even see. If you put somebody on something like a front foot elevated split squat, which requires a little more depth, very good progressive tool, amazing exercise, right? On their first ones, they usually won't like to go too low, but they'll usually be holding their breath. Once you kind of get them queued up and you tell them, right, I want you to breathe as you go down and up, watch, that will be, they'll get their lowest. And part of that is just you're allowing your system to settle down. And when your system settles down, we have better movement capabilities. When you hold your breath and stress your system out, we reduce movement capabilities, as simple as that, whether it's a squat or a single leg squat. And I think that might be it with why it's so important for breathing and single leg stance. There might have been one more reason, but I think that's powerful enough.
Cool. So you also mentioned like other like exercises we're gonna do to help you find the balance in your body, right? So can you talk a little about like how would you program the exercise for your athlete or for your clients to like to help they find the balance?
Yeah, so the way I structure my programs, I usually start, we'll do an activation activity or two, which is important, but you never want to spend too much time with activating. 1 to 2 things, maybe 3 if they really, really need it, really. But one time through, and then we get into core, which is more of a continuum, because as you know, with core, we still want to be breathing. And my core exercises are very sort of, movement-based, multidimensional, single leg stance involving. I pick 3 core exercises to go through a few times, or maybe 3 times. And usually those 3 core exercises will be biased to something in the sort of anterior posterior chain, something of the lateral chain, and then something rotational. Not always, but that is somehow the core. That is a way the core works. They does work together, so you can't really separate it. But I like to separate it just so that we get an understanding of these different movements. And that's not something I just live by. It's just more of variation. Just give the person a variable experience of, okay, I've got movement this way, I've got movement stability going this way, and then I've got rotation this way, which also involves my hips to move. You go through all that, by that time they should have a pretty full general body activation, because we have reciprocated, alternated, move the hips, move the rib cage, breathe with it. I very rarely am my core just solely isolating the abs. Usually it's involving adductors. It's usually involving glutes. There's just so many different things we can do to, again, bias the positions. I love chops, for example. Got loads and loads of chop variations, because chop variations, ultimately, you can put into a single leg stance. You can start with half kneeling. You can put into a staggered stance. You can put them in a total single leg stance. You put them on a block to help them feel their hip more. So there's so many different ways we could use core to, again, exploit these weaknesses, exploit these asymmetries, because that's where I really start attacking it. When you want to talk about these asymmetries, some of the things that we generally need, because of the way of a right-shifted pelvis, we tend to bias more right hamstrings, adductors. We tend to bias more right oblique, especially with the diaphragm position. Not that the left isn't good. The left glute tends to be much better than a right glute. And that's good, because that pushes the hips to the right, if you think about it. The left doesn't always get left behind. There's some things the left does well, but there's things that allow the right to gravitate the hips over. So let's get that going on the left. We need a little bit more left hamstring. We need a little bit more left adductors. So whether it's chops or half kneeling positions or med ball throws, anything to kind of get us gravitating over the left is good. We definitely need more left oblique. That is huge. So all the breathing stuff there is getting cued. And that's even the most basic of movements, such as a bear crawl. We can get the obliques going. And that's basically how I like to do it. It's the whole movement. I mean, the whole lift is a continuum of learning to move better. In the strength, we might do a little bit more traditional patterns, but there's still always, we could throw in a breathing exercises before a heavy deadlift to kind of settle everything down, or we could throw in some single leg plyos to stimulate the plyos. So it never ends. I feel like we should always be challenging the body to figure its hemispheric sides out.
So, we talk about like breathing a lot and moving a lot. So how exactly, well, I mean, like when you train breathing or when you teach like breathing, what exactly do you be looking at?
Sure, that's a good question. So the biggest thing that we do as humans is hold our breath. Couple of reasons. That does create tension. It does. So what the power lifters do, what they do actually is they'll do a big breath hold to lift that weight, because what they're actually doing, they're creating mass tension around their body, and that is going to help them lift. Make no mistake. But again, you are living in a stress zone, and you need to be able to manipulate that. With breathing, you sort of do something a little bit differently. You're kind of letting the air flow, and you're relying more on that flow to create good intra-abdominal pressure, which is a little bit more of a centralized tension, which hopefully that together with the muscles pushing the weight, whether it's a deadlift, squat, or a bench press, is going to facilitate the proper motion, as opposed to breath holding, which is a lot of neck tension, back tension, everything. And that's usually when we might have lifted the weight, but we might not feel that good afterwards. And I'm telling you, we do breath holding all the time, because at the end of the day, it creates diaphragmatic tension, which diaphragm, like I said, is super powerful. 20,000 breaths a day, 22,000 plus breaths a day. This diaphragmatic holding tension is what we do to kind of help us. Again, path of least resistance. You know, you get up out of a chair without thinking, you might have held your breath. There you go. You're trying to make it easier for yourself. So the smarter thing, or the harder thing to do, because we are kind of working hard, is to breathe out, because that engages the core, creates the intra-abdominal pressure. And then, like I said, it also keeps us in a calmer place. So if you just think of just these sort of bars rising of your stress bars, if you're holding your breath, it's going to like rise up, and then maybe it might come down a little bit, but depending on your lifestyle, all that, you might be living in this stress zone. If you're a little bit more of your breath, you're able to bring that stress zone down, and kind of just keep it at a better level. Not only that, you're going to get your heart rate at a lower level too. So it's important for not only giving the best intra-abdominal pressure, what's going to help you with the movement, eliminating unwanted biomechanical positions such as excessive back extension, because like I mentioned, path of least resistance, the back is going to go when you're not sure of it. The back is going to be the first one to kind of lock out when you're not sure of it. We want a little more neutrality. We don't want anything. We just want a continuum. So one thing I look for is ribs down, because we've just exhaled properly. If the ribs flared, that is our lower back taking on everything, and we don't necessarily want that, because that is going to fatigue out. Who doesn't have tight lower backs, right? When I don't work out for a long time, my lower back gets tight. Well, that's a never-ending sort of continuum. We need to always re-engage the core. Starts with breathing, and again, if you get a good exhale, you're going to drop the ribs. So eliminate biomechanical unwanted positions. Keep yourself in a calmer place, and create that good intra-abdominal pressure to help you with the lift.
Cool. Kind of want to talk a little bit more about breathing. So, there's like coaches or like therapists talk about like 3D breathing or like diaphragm breathing. Do you like do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, because I've learned from Postural Restoration Institute, we have our own sort of terminology of things. We're not changing anything. We just sort of say our things, and even then, it's not strict. It's at the end of the day, whatever words you say that make it click is good. So therefore, I hate to use the word diaphragmatic breathing, because I do not want any sort of preconceived notions or anything like that. I'm going to say what I say to that person and how I think they're going to understand what I'm going to say. There's no one cookie cutter phrase that you're going to give to everybody. You have to really sort of use different language, because everybody will be different, and some people will not get it. It's for some reason, you just have to someone dial in, and sometimes that might even be you. You never know. You never know. So, I'm going to cue things a little differently. I talk about expansion. We want expansion, because we don't really think of the rib cage expanding. And when we think of expansion, we really want to think of the sides and the back expanding, a little bit the front too. But the thing about the front is most people are already having a elevated narrow rib cage because all they do is extend their back. And when you elevate and make the rib cage all tall, it narrows it. It doesn't allow it to expand. So that's the whole thing, is like we want to like cue or get them into positions. Again, in PRI, we have certain positions that will maximize or enhance breathing. We'll get them into there. And then we want to cue these expand into places where you don't think of breathing. Like, how a doctor listens to your breathing, they put something on your back, the stethoscope. Well, that's because we actually have a lot of space in the posterior aspects of our rib cage. Got a lot of space for air to go there. So we want to try and learn to breathe into our back. We want to breathe into our upper rib cage. This is all going to make more use of the space there. And then, like I said, really important, cueing the ribs to drop at the front, making sure that we're dropping all the way down, exhaling to completion, because that is what maximally stimulates the transverse abdominis. These are, again, all different things that we need to sort of be aware of. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would say to them, but again, everybody's a little bit different. And number one, I would say, is you got to just slow the rate down, because everybody breathes fast. So before we even talk about what we're breathing, how we're breathing, like, we got to slow it down, and we got to get them to be comfortable slowing it down.
Cool. I love the way you use the word expansion. Love it.
Big time. Yeah. Because that's what our right side needs. Honestly, that's the key. Because as I said, the left side is very open. We want to learn to bring the left side down. Well, what we want to do on the other side, we got to reciprocate. We want to get that right side open. And believe me, there are a lot of problems that stem from a compressed right side, because that is almost the trigger to our parasympathetic state. When that right side chest and a ribs cage is so tight and compressed, it almost becomes tough for us to ever leave this sort of stress state. So expansion's huge.
Cool. So next thing I want to talk about is like adductor.
Okay. Add.
Yeah. So it's like last time we talked a little bit about adductor. You and I know I post some things about adductor. So why is adductor so important?
Adductors are very important, very, very important. And I would feel like they're only just starting to get their reputation worth. Previously, it was glutes, and glutes are king. Let's put a quick little disclaimer. Glutes are definitely king, no doubt about it. They surround the pelvis, which is very important. They're sort of the outer sort of, crest, and they're movers of the pelvis, which is very important. But we need to start from the beginning. And before that, when the pelvis first takes a step, it has to ground itself, right? It has to connect to the floor. We live in a world with gravity, physics, and we have to rely on these momentum principles to get us moving. Well, in order for us to sort of have this healthy moving relationship, we function in a closed chain, which means foot on the floor. And for us to that happen efficiently, we have to ground ourselves to some degree. Whatever that means, who cares? But your muscles do care, and they have to sort of do their job. And one of the biggest sort of references, mental references from or basically connecting your femur to your pelvis is an adductor and a hamstring. They're very more eccentrically driven muscles, whereas your quad and glute are slightly more concentric. Like I said, they're propulsive muscles, but these are sort of the grounders, which means as the muscles are getting longer in length, they're getting more tense as they're preparing for the floor. So just in terms of whether it's taking a simple step or a change of direction in sport, you got to figure that those adductors and hamstrings, I mean, hamstrings are more sagittal, adductors are more frontal, but they're also, everything's triplanar, right? There's no one way. They're incredibly important of supporting and stabilizing the pelvis, getting yourself to load over that one leg, which will then give you the best chance to push off from it. When you don't load and properly gravitate, that is when we can see the knee those common ACL tears or meniscus tears, because it's just like an earthquake-proof building. If you don't have proper stacking, there's going to be a little issue. So the concept of stacking, whether it's ribcage stacking over hips or hips stacking over the foot, it's what we're trying to do for optimal balance and ability to react. And so adductors are just basically your number one or two, whether it's they're one or hamstrings are two, or they're two, hamstrings are one. Your number one and two are really connecting the hips to the ground per se.
So it's kind of like helps to transfer the energy, right?
Kinda. I mean, I guess what you're saying, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, you're transferring energy. You call it that. You could also, it's also very important because if you think about how the pelvis is already biased to one side, that biases one adductor to be a little bit more facilitated and better positioned to do its job. This is called being stuck in right stance. Therefore, the left adductor tends to be very compromised, and we it's not like we see more strains on the left. We could see strains either way. We could see strains on one side because it's weaker. We could see strains on the other side because it's overly dominant. The point is, acquiring balance is something that we always need to do because of how important the adductors are to gait and forward locomotor movement.
So, talk about like balance a lot, and we talk about movement. So, and you mentioned that most of the people, they're biased like right side a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you're going to work the other side a little bit more, or?
Yeah, no, I don't really worry about that. If anything, like I said, when we activate in the beginning, we might do an activity that's asymmetrical sometimes. If I know it's been like a heavy day, or if I know if this is a client who's come to me in pain and they have issues, yeah, we're going to do these activities in the beginning that are asymmetrical to tune up your weak sides. Similarly with athletes, maybe if I know it's like day after the game and then they're going to come in, I know because they've been pushing off that left leg and loading onto their right, that they're probably very asymmetrical on the hips. So we'll do a little retuning activity. But then, like I said, we got to get into some kind of core movement, and that's where we want to reciprocate and alternate. End goal is you always want to reciprocate and alternate because that is what human movement is. And so therefore, if you've only targeted the weaker asymmetrical patterns, I don't think you've done the full job, because at the end of the day, like I said, we got to move forward. We got to reciprocate, alternate, shift one side to the other, be able to breathe, do all that. And that's where I find a lot of these core movements will target all of that. We just got to kind of tune up and get ready for it. But no, as far as in the core and even in strength, you're always going to balance it out. What I like to do is maybe change which side I start with. So I'll be like, okay, start with your left leg this time. Okay, this time start with your right leg. And then based on which was like the weaker, start with that one on the third one because you just know they want to put full focus into the weaker side. That's how you'll get those weaker sides more stronger. I've never heard any good arguments about doing more reps.
So, yeah, so it's kind of like corrective exercise, right? Activate at the beginning, then do the main exercise to like let the brain know, or let the brain like reposition all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the brain has to be able to accept it. Yeah, because you have to sort of be able to accept these sort of positions. So that's the thing with activation is like, well, what are we trying to achieve? Well, we want to feel things that we're not feeling normally. And what is that? Well, some of it could be muscles that we need, core, hamstrings, adductors, glutes, whatever. But some of it also should be breathing, expansion, compression on one side versus the other. So that's very important. Of sort of just getting that. But the rest of it, at the end of the day, is all about putting your body in a position to succeed with what we're trying to achieve. Yes, exercise is meant to challenge us. Yes, there's supposed to be breakdown, but the problem movement trainers, coaches, all that make is overcomplicating an exercise or making it too tough. And then we, again, start stimulating all the wrong things. What you want is to set them up for success. Or if, as one of the gurus I look up to, Dr. Pat Davidson, says, you want to take someone through a layup version of an exercise and then progress them to a three-point version of an exercise. And that's very much true. If you're teaching basketball, you're not going to put them on the three-point line to shoot. we do the basic skills first, and every human is the same. And I even treat myself this way, Of course, I love to jump into exercise sometimes, but sometimes like, no, let's retune and get reacquainted with some of these things we need to be good with. And that's it, really. It's just creating good habits.
Good. Get it. So, yeah, that's all the question I have for today, man.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, great stuff. Great questions.
So, appreciate it. So, still, if there's like coaches interested in what you're talking about, where can they find you? Or I know there's like a lot of great stuff, great content you posted on your Instagram. So, like, can you share to everyone?
Oh yeah. So if you follow me at, as you can see hopefully you can see my handle, BigMish_movement. Movement is abbreviated to MVMNT. Or you can look me up on YouTube, which is Big Mish Movement. I have a chat channel with tutorial videos as well as workshop videos where I talk about concepts. I've been inactive on that since the basketball season, but now the season's over, I really need to get on starting posting videos again because I do enjoy it. But yeah, you can check me out on Instagram or YouTube and send me a message if you want to talk about the concept. I'm happy to talk about it. I love teaching this stuff to people, but more importantly, inspiring them to learn more about it because this is absolutely the truth of the human body. We're just not told it. We're taught that we're balanced and all that, but we have to sort of think a little bit more deeper. And to be honest, this mentality is actually the binding and bridging of Eastern medicine with Western medicine, holistic stuff. This is everything that I've always wanted to know because we're bringing it all together. I've always been fanatical of Eastern medicine concepts, martial art sort of concepts and different things. And now that I'm starting to see, okay, now I know why they were doing that. Now I understand why they're doing it. There really is a beautiful linkage here. So I encourage everybody to go look into Postural Restoration Institute as well if you want to. But if you want to know more about it, just shoot me a message. I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, man. Love it. Appreciate it, man.
Anytime. Happy to do it again. Hope you guys learned some good stuff today.
We're going to do it again.
We will. Appreciate you, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See you,
Take
man.
care. See you. Have a good night.
You too.